Hello there, it's good to have you on Global Business Report. Ni Uyilo, under Buhari's administration, Nigeria's economy has no doubt struggled with tepid growth, including a 15-month-long recession. The president's plans to diversify economy away from its reliance on oil is still to see the light of day. Indeed, hopes of an agricultural-driven economy have been hurt by increased insecurity in key parts of the country. With a new mandate for another 4-year term in office, will President Buhari get the economy back on track? All this will be discussed by a special panel on the program. Today, I'm Ni Uyilo. Welcome to the special edition of Rise a Business Report. To have you. Here in the studio, we have a renowned economic editor, former advisor at the African Development Bank, former managing director and CEO of Liberty Bank PLC, who is currently the Pro-Chancellor of Ambrose Ali University in the south of Nigeria, Chief Lawson Omokodian. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Also, we have CEO Quest Advisory Services, Bayo Rotimi, who has more than 20 years experience in banking and has headed one of Nigeria's leading investment company, FCMB Capital Market. You're welcome to the program.
Pleasure.
All right, and our in-house business analyst, former CEO of Citizens Bank and project director at KSB, and also a chartered accountant, Chika Mbonu is also here as well. All right, I think I have a full panel as it is, and that's a good thing. It's good to have you, gentlemen. All right, Chika, let's start with the financial sector. The reappointment of Godwin Emefiele, is this a signal to the direction of financial policies will go under this administration for the next 4 years?
Well, I mean, things and things of stability. And, it was a reward for him for the way he has supported government policies in the last 4 years. Remember, we went through a recession which he, through his policies, he called heterodox, and got Nigeria out of that. So I believe it's more of the same, for the next 4 years. Remember, fighting inflation, trying to strengthen, make sure the exchange rate stability is there, and then trying to see whether balancing those, we can also have some little growth in the economy. Basically, those are the same things you're going to pursue for the next 4 years.
All right, very good. Now, Chief Lawson, in terms of regulation, how would you assess CBN's role in the financial sector under this administration? We have MPR still at 13.5%. Is this the way to go? Where should we be at with the MPR at the current rate?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here today. For me, I think Godwin has done fairly well.
Okay.
He's, as an experienced banker, he knew where to put the stops, and has done so. Where I probably think he should take a lot more interest is the interest rate.
Okay.
We need a much lower interest rate to stimulate production and to stimulate development, the economy. I also think he needs to take a second look at the impunity in banking. There's a lot of recklessness in banking today.
Why would you say that?
The debits, the way customers complain, if you read the newspapers daily, the way customers complain about the multifarious debits going into their accounts, but they look small. They add up.
The hidden charges, as it were.
Hidden charges, 50 naira, 100 naira, 25 naira, all kinds, and nobody's querying them. They need to be asked to justify those charges, to justify those debits, so that we will now believe that our monies are actually safe in these various banks. MPRO, as I mentioned, it needs to gradually come down. Inflation has been tamed largely. It needs to come down too further.
But where do you think would be the preferred rate for Nigeria? A growing development, a developing country like Nigeria?
Yeah, the interest rate regime should actually be between 15 and 19%,
okay.
For me.
All right.
For me. When it was achieved by Joseph Sanusi, former governor of the central bank, in around 1999, year 2000.
All right.
You see, it had a very positive effect on growth and development.
Very good. Now, Bayo, undoubtedly, mergers have taken root in Nigeria's financial sector. We're talking about Access Bank and, of course, Diamond, for example. What impact is this having on the banking sector in terms of the public, the banking public, and, of course, investors alike?
Thank you very much. Well, mergers and acquisitions are typically driven by a desire to have a larger share of the market and hopefully consolidate in terms of profitability and return on investment.
Right.
But I guess the critical issue is how many banks do we have in Nigeria? What proportion of the Nigerian public are banked today?
Indeed.
We have an informal economy that is significantly larger than the formal economy. How do we bring a lot of the people who are excluded today into the formal banking system?
Yeah.
So to what extent have our banks been able to reach out to these people and bring them on board? I think that there is still a lot of work to be done. Most of our banks are focused on the middle to the upper income class segment of the society, and they are missing out on the people who are at the bottom. That's where the critical mass is, and they need to develop the skills and the technology to be able to play in that space.
Very good, Bayo. Now, Chika, still on the mergers. Are investors, in terms of not just investors, but depositors, when you have mergers like that, are their interests being taken care of in terms of regulation of this policy, mergers by the CBN? What do you make of that scenario?
Indeed, what normally happens, let's use the example of Access Bank.
You and I were discussing this not too long ago, if I remember.
Let's look at the Access Bank and the Diamond Bank merger. A lot of people, they pushed out what they call the merger parameters. Basically, the different stakeholders in the merger, the shareholders of the bank, the depositors of the bank, the customers of the bank, and then, of course, the regulatory authorities. Everybody had something to gain from the merger. Indeed, for that example we're talking about, remember we said that Diamond Bank was the champion in the retail segment of the market.
Yeah.
And then Access Bank was very good at the upper end. And the merger was going to provide Access Bank the liquidity required to play more in the market.
All right.
And then also guarantee the solidity the retail customers require in their business. I do think that they had nothing to lose.
Okay.
And I have been involved post the merger in a couple of things I've been doing. And despite some issues that have cropped up, they've been able to manage the process very well.
Very good. Now, Chief, Bayo mentioned something about the size of the banking sector itself. So, in view of this, do you see the possibility of mergers? They have their different reasons for coming together. But what are the prospects for that in the next 4 years, as it were? Are we still going to see scenarios like that?
You see, when banks become too big, you see, they concentrate more on customers that have huge resources. And so the small customer, the medium-sized companies, the small-sized companies are always on the edge.
Okay.
The sector needs to correct the misadventure of the consolidation exercise. The consolidation exercise of 2005, 2006, was it 2004, 2005?
Yeah.
Was a disaster. Banks, you see, the more you have the mergers, the fewer the banks get.
Right.
And the rural sector, the rural customers, they are left out. Remember, days where the banking sector had a program called rural banking.
Okay.
There was allocation to different banks that at this particular point in time, you should have these rural branches. And I tell you, forget about this microfinance. Microfinance cannot solve the problem. They cannot step into those shoes.
But it was set up specifically for that role. So is there a failure in that sector as well?
Is there what?
A failure?
No. The microfinance, no, they have problems. They always have problems. With credit extension in Nigeria is always...
Yeah, paying back the money and everything. Yeah, it is.
If there must be, for us to be able to democratize access to banking services, we may really have to pay compensation to those shareholders of banks that lost their capital, for no reason of theirs. Yeah. You move shareholders' funds or from 2 billion to 25 billion. That's crisis. And that's what happened. And the banking sector did not recover for a long time. Even now, I'm not even sure it has recovered. Because today, I believe that the small size, the medium size, and the large banks must coexist side by side.
Indeed.
And even the attempt now to ask banks, to ask shareholders to put in capital, is it 10 billion, as the case may be, to have a small bank, and other to have a medium-sized bank. It's not, people are not buying into it because they have suffered losses, which were totally not from the fault of theirs.
Very good, Chief. Now,
I don't know. I don't want to move out of banking without addressing an issue.
All right, go ahead.
I'll carry that on a little exercise.
All right.
Since we're looking at the span of 4 years for this administration. And we looked at the top 5 banks of Nigeria, and who control about 80% of the market, and looked at how was the result in 2015, and compared to 2018 year end. And it gets some interesting figures. For the top 5 banks, their profit before tax between 2015 and 2018 grew by more than 70%. By more than 70%. Now, the interesting thing is this. The core business the banks are supposed to be doing, which is the lending program, you won't believe that the loans actually grew by only 11%. Whereas the profits grew by 71%, their loans actually grew by about 11%. Now, the interesting thing about that is this. Some banks that grew their profit by more than 200% actually had negative growth between 2015 and 2018 in their lending programs. It tells you they were booking more loans in 2015 than they booked in 2018. It tells you, it gives you a lot of information. You will find out, I've been talking about this program, that a lot of banks, as Chief has been saying, have left their core work and they were chasing fixed income securities. And we're not doing real lending. So you'll find them making so much money where their loan books have actually been diminishing, which is their core contribution to the growth in the economy. 3 out of those 5 banks actually had, between 2015 and 20, booked more loans in 2015 than they booked in 2018. And that doesn't speak well for the economy.
You're right. Just having like 5 banks, so paints a picture. What are the others doing, as it were? Very good. We're done with the financial sector, but we're still in the sector, as it were. Now, let's look at the capital market, Bio. The financial sector has dominated trading there for some time. Do you see this continuing despite new listings, as it were, especially for the next 4 years?
Thank you. Well, the tier 1 banks, the listed ones amongst them, will continue to dominate trading activities. Like Chika just said, the banks are extremely profitable. I think either the first or the second most profitable bank in Nigeria delivers consistently a return on equity in excess of 30%. Wow. So you will find that they will continually be attractive. But we're seeing new listings. MTN has been listed. Unfortunately, there is some controversy dogging that particular exercise. In the last couple of years, a Dangote Cement has come in. So you are seeing some companies that are driving market capitalization. But if you x-ray the market properly, you will see that there is still a dearth of investor confidence.
Yeah.
If you look at the 8.8, almost 9 trillion naira pension industry today,
All right.
less than 7% of those assets are in the capital markets.
Wow.
How do you grow a capital market when your pension industry is not an active participant inside of that market? How do you grow a capital market when you have less than 250 companies listed on a 60-year-old stock exchange? So we really, really need to take a step back. What are the benefits from a listing? What are the things we can do to encourage more listing?
Yeah.
So it goes back to policy, it goes back to government initiatives to encourage businesses to do well. As the businesses are thriving, then there is a story that you can sell to the investing public. So there is a lot that needs to return our markets to where it used to be, because for the last 10 years easily, our market has been underperforming.
Yeah, talking about underperformance as well, Chief, I'd like you to take this one. The insurance sector has not fared favorably in the capital market. It has so much potential, as it were. And we're now hearing of new capitalization requirement. If you remember, Chika and I talked about that not too long ago for stakeholders. But is this enough to shore up the fortunes of the insurance sector in the market? What should it be doing right now to get more investors coming in?
I'm sorry. I'm going to disappoint you in this. I'm not actually in support of a sector or a sectoral capitalization process that creates problems for the sector members.
Wow.
I'm not. This economy is a developing economy.
All right.
We do not need to annihilate any group so that you can have a picture of a big sector, as it were. About 2-3 years after the banking consolidation, there was a consolidation and capital increase in the insurance sector.
Okay.
And what the insurance sector did, which the banking sector refused to, could not do, which was quite regrettable. The insurance sector divided that sector into 3 groups.
All right.
You have life insurance companies that specialize in life policies.
There's assurance, yeah.
And you have those who were into general insurance, and those who were into another phase of insurance. 3, I can't remember that. And so in the process, not too many insurance companies fell off the cliff. The one they have decided to do now, raising capital to 20 billion, 10 billion, as the case may be, many insurance companies are going to collapse. And you will now get into unholy alliances, mergers that will create more problems. You remember how bank mergers created a lot of problems. Many of those that consolidated at the time, about four different groups had collapsed and had died off. That's what you are going to get in insurance company. And it's really not going to help getting them listed on the exchange. It's going to create a problem that will take them another 4 years to be able to resolve. You see, maybe thereafter there might be some sanity or there might be some reconsideration, but the point is that it is totally unnecessary. You see, in Africa, the Nigerian insurance companies constitute the 3rd most capitalized in this continent. There's South Africa, there's Egypt. The next is Nigeria. So what is the problem? I really don't know. I do not know how our policy makers suddenly have a brainwave to create problems and totally disturb a sector that is flailing and trying, because of the environment we are in, and managing to survive, because the future is going to be bright from experience.
All right. Do you now support a streamlining of the active players within that sector itself, perhaps to have a manageable few that could deliver?
Why do you need a manageable few?
Chief, if I may add a little more into this, on this capitalization of insurance companies. Indeed, the last recapitalization of the insurance companies was done, I think, in 2005 or 7.
All right.
Now, the exchange rate with them was about 151 to the dollar. Now, we're now at $360 to the dollar. Let me tell you something very clearly, because I work with some insurance companies. Okay. The value of assets have increased in astronomical levels from the time the last recapitalization was done. And consequently, also the liabilities of insurance companies have also increased. And then you find, and then, of course the operation expense also, and they're still operating on the same capital that was on about how many years ago.
All right.
So that's a major issue. Secondly, the industry has been bedeviled. If you look at the analysis, we analyze some insurance companies.
Okay.
There are about 51 of them now who are licensed across the three cadre.
Yeah.
You know, what's happening now that by the time you count 1 to 10, the other ones are carrying so many claims in their balance sheets, they're not even able to pay. And that has hurt the confidence in the industry. So because they don't have the capital to pay that.
That's the key word, confidence.
Pay that.
Yeah.
And so the depreciation in the currency has eroded the working capital, and even to a large extent, the core capital of a lot of these insurance companies. And if we need to move the industry to the next level that it is, reset confidence. You know, so what you have now is that there's a cannibalization of premium. So people actually go out and look for businesses knowing they will not pay the claims when it comes. And so they're able to cannibalize premium that should be 3%, and they're willing to take 1% for it because they know they will not pay that. So the industry needs to be sanitized. You know, now, if the route of increasing capitals have to be increased. Yeah. Now, I will not agree with Chief that we have to leave capital the way it is.
But he's also trying to make a point as well.
I believe there's just an omission in what Chika just mentioned.
Okay.
Insurance companies do not stand alone in the payment of claims. Every insurance company is reinsured.
Okay.
And it is that reinsurance that gives them that flexibility to be able to pay claims when they come up. There might be 1 or 2 problems. You see, it is not a general phenomenon in the insurance industry of Nigeria. I don't think so.
Very good. Now, gentlemen, Bayo, you know, we're still talking about the capital market. Now, how would you rate the CBN's FX policies at the capital market recently? Is there a measure of stability? Is the Naira be strengthened, as it were?
Well, if you go into maybe the last 4 years, or maybe the first tenure of the governor, Nigeria has one principal source of foreign exchange inflows, and that is the sale of crude oil. So our economic health is largely driven by the price of crude oil. So when crude oil crashed to as low as $26, our inflow of dollars into our economy decreased.
All right.
And that created a devaluation ultimately. And it wiped out a lot of businesses. It wiped out a lot of investments, you know, because a lot of the manufacturing companies in Nigeria typically import their critical manufacturing inputs. And when prices of those inputs double and they are not able to pass those prices across to their customers, then you have a situation where listed companies are making losses. When they are making losses, investors are jittery. They want to exit the position. The more investors that are exiting, the lower the prices of those stocks will be, market capitalization, investor confidence, and the like. So there is a direct correlation between monetary policies and its impact on the Nigerian capital markets. So the CBN was dealing with a difficult situation created by external factors, the fall in crude oil prices. How did they respond to it? My own personal view is that the response was not as efficient as it should have been. Yeah. It was not as timely as it should have been. Because if certain proactive steps had been taken, we may have forestalled the recession that our economy slipped into for 5 consecutive quarters. The multiplicity of interest rates was also a bit of a significant challenge, because investors are having one window, manufacturers another window, SMEs, school children, school fees. You are creating a distortion, you are creating room for arbitrage. But fortunately, albeit somewhat belatedly, CBN came up with the importer and exporter window that was largely market driven. So you almost had a coalescing of rates. Yes, we still have a 305 official rate, which I have a big problem with, because in my view, there is no justification for that, especially when the government of Nigeria needs so much revenues. Why are we converting our crude oil proceeds at 305 and not the market determined 360. So whatever happens with monetary policy will have an effect on the capital markets, and that is why our markets have struggled for a while.
Very good. Gentlemen, I'd like you to hold your thoughts on those issues. We'll be right back after this break. You're still on to this special edition, the inauguration special edition of the Global Business Report here on the Rise News. We'll be right back. Stay with us. All right, you're welcome back to this special edition of the Global Business Report. And just before we went on break, we were talking about several issues, talking about the financial services sector. Now, gentlemen, it's good to have you back again. Let's take a look at the electricity sector. And, you know, this is one that I don't know if it defies solution or what you might want to call this. Now, Chika, I'm going to start with you. From a credit-worthy point of view, how financially stable are current stakeholders or firms in Nigeria's power sector?
What a question. You know, I mean, look at it this way. There are so many problems in this sector. You know, you have the transmission company of Nigeria as a hard and, again, happens to be the weakest link in that sector. You have the GENCOs who are operating there, who have about at least 13,000 megawatts of power of availability in Nigeria, but no gas to fire the plant. You have the DISCOs down there who, you know, people just did a mad rush with no capability to run those companies. You know, they thought they just pick up national cake. You have companies who went to go and pick up those companies. Now, you remember also that there were tariff regimes in that sector. And there were milestones set up to achieve cost-reflective tariffs.
All right.
Now, there have been about 3 or 4 tariff cycles that have been aborted. So the sector now is operating without a very good tariff, a cost-reflective tariff regime.
Okay.
Then, too, when you hear people talk about the fact that we need emergency in the power sector, it's because of the fact that there's similar lack of passion or drive in the importance of this sector to the economy. The economy is a standstill because of power. Now, if I let me just answer your question,
okay. Yeah.
There's so much debt in the system. They're owing GENCOs, they're owing DISCOs. And the power regime we have in Nigeria is not cost reflective of the amount of power that will be pumped out. And we all have been screaming and crying and saying that this sector requires a rethink. You know, a total rethink to reflect the importance of the sector to Nigeria.
Very good. Now, Chief, you know, he's said a lot about the power sector. Now, the so-called, I know we should go a little way back, and the so-called unbundling of the PHCN into several groups, does that reflect true deregulation of Nigeria's power sector? And the next 4 years, you know, Nigerians are yearning for a change. They need to see something positive here. So what are your thoughts?
Let me make a statement that you might disagree with.
All right.
Nigeria does not run on 6,000 megawatts of electricity.
Currently.
That is public supply of electricity.
Okay.
Nigeria today has over 20,000 megawatts of installed capacity. Do you know where they're coming from? The generators, solar power, inverters. Many companies in a typical day probably have light for 6 hours. Their generators power on when the DISCOs take the light. But it's expensive. So the public supply is the more efficient power source and what everybody wants to have access to. So we come there. The current discourse, many of them are a write-off. As my brother Chika mentioned, you don't go into the acquisition of power assets if you do not have patient capital. You don't have the equity base that you will put money in there, and you don't grab profit in the next 2-3 years. You let it sit and you develop it. Thereafter, the money just streams in perpetuity.
So the question
what we have today,
yeah.
what we have is that those who do not understand the management and operation
And economics.
and the economics of a power distribution company are the ones in there.
So the question of expertise is obviously...
No, it's a big problem.
But then again, you have a regulator. What are they doing?
The regulators, yes, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, or as it were, I don't know whether they are hamstrung. The agreement, the discourse entered into, for me, cannot be agreements in perpetuity. The agreements have to be reviewed. I totally also agree that there's a tariff issue. You know, the exchange rate changed on them from 150 to 3 something right now. They have to get in some equipment, and they are purchased at a much higher rate. So there's a tariff issue. But while the public is totally resistant to such tariff increases, it's because when they came, there was no change. Yeah. In fact, today, the power sector is worse than what it was in 1998. You see, and that's a disaster. I come from Edo State. And you remember when the managing director of Benin BDC, Electricity Distribution Company, went to visit His Excellency. He eventually drove the management out of his office. That you have kept this city and the states in darkness. Even the adjoining states of Delta and is it Ondo, they are all crying that there's no improvement in power, and it's even getting worse. So we need to take a look at those agreements. There are some of them that need capital injection. There are some of them that need to be bought out completely. If you don't do that, the economic growth of this country will be stymied. But if you manage to have an improvement in power, this economy will be liberated.
Very good. Now, Bayo, you've heard Chika and Chief, they've just painted the grim realities on the power sector. If you'd like to add to it, where does competitiveness then come into this?
Thank you. Well, if you go back to the origins, because sometimes we need to dissect the origins. There was a Power Energy Sector Reform Act, which gave birth to NERC and the unbundling that we spoke about. Yeah. Nigeria is not short of policies. We're not short of regulation. What we're short of or short on is implementation.
All right.
Now, was it wrong to privatize the power sector? Certainly not. But there is a criteria for privatization. The prospective bidder must have technical, managerial, financial capacity proven beyond reasonable doubt. So the people that superintended that process clearly did not do a thorough job. And that is why we ended up with preferred bidders who lacked the financial, definitely the technical capacity to run these institutions. They went into the financial markets, they took short-term money to fund a long-term asset, and there was a mismatch. So we were not surprised that they ran into trouble. There is a crisis in that sector. Like Chika said, everybody is owing everybody. So how do we move forward from here? Post-privatization, for every government-owned asset that is privatized, there is a post-privatization monitoring. There are certain guidelines and deliverables and targets that are agreed upon. The BP is the agency of government that has been empowered by law to supervise this process, to sanction people who are not paying, to unwind the process if it can be proven beyond doubt that these people have failed to deliver on a signed sale and purchase agreement. So I think the BP needs to take action on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria. The people who can no longer do this, run these companies, let's invite new people to take them out. The government still retains a 40% stake in all of these companies. So they have a say, they have a seat at the board, and they also are hand in glove with the regulator. So let's get this thing done properly.
Very good, gentlemen. You've just painted a grim reality regarding the power sector there and what we can all see. Very good. Now, let's take a look at taxation, for under this administration and moving forward. IMF at one point accused Nigeria of multiple taxation. Is this an apt description? I'm going to start with you, Bayo.
Absolutely. There is a multiplicity of taxes in Nigeria at federal, at state, at local government level. Greatest challenge we face in tax administration in Nigeria is that of a trust deficit. The people who are to pay the taxes do not believe that the government that will utilize the tax proceeds will utilize it judiciously. So there is a trust deficit. We've had 60 years of government not delivering on its promises. So you are now asking these same people to bring their disposable income that is diminishing by the day, right, to put it in the coffers, that they have no say in how those funds will be administered and expended. So there's a trust deficit. But how do you cure the problem? Somebody has to blink first. So right now, we have less than 6% tax to GDP ratio, one of the lowest amongst emerging markets, of which Nigeria is a prominent member. So we need to bring more people onto the tax net. How do we do that? My view, rather than punitive measures, I think it is about incentivizing people. Encourage small, and medium-scale enterprises to register voluntarily, and I believe that the Presidential Enabling Business Council is working closely with CAC. They've brought down the cost of business enterprise registrations and all of that. So there is some movement in that direction. We need to intensify that. We also need to make sure that we stop this process where 70% of government's revenues is going to serve recurrent expenditure. In that kind of environment, people will not be encouraged to pay taxes.
Very good. Now, let's take a look at the manufacturing sector. Chief, I'm going to start with you. We've seen a flight of commercially viable industries leaving Nigeria over time for the African countries, other African countries, as it were. What are your thoughts on that? What is the issue here?
It's a very difficult situation. The infrastructure has not, over time, has not measured up. In Nigeria, there is no city in Nigeria where its length and breadth, walking through the length and breadth of that particular city, you have potable water. There's none. Where you can go to the extreme eastern part of the town and take water from the tap and drink. Go to the northern part, western part, southern part, there's none. So electricity doesn't work. You have to spend so much money and you don't get much. The rules are not there either. So both local government, state government, and federal government must play their role. I'm tired of hearing people heaping blame at the doorsteps of the federal government. No, it's beyond that. No, it is, let's go down and ask people to be more and more sensitive to the environment in which they live. So we need to get back Michelin. We need to get back Dunlop. We need to get back a lot more companies into Nigeria. And we can only do that if we take a second look at our infrastructural facilities. These were the companies that made Nigeria.
All right.
We had Bata. We had all kinds. We had Berek. We had Everlast. There were so many of those companies that went into carpet manufacturing.
Yeah. The textile companies.
Textile companies, hundreds. Either they are dead or they have relocated. So if all these have left the shores of Nigeria, how do you employ your young ones? So there must be a new thinking. I really will opt for a situation where the federal government actually gives over some of these roads to states and local governments. This is what is usually my responsibility. Please handle it, and that probably will take us back to this whole argument of restructuring.
All right.
This is a very important, because sometimes I don't know whether I feel as if we speak from two sides of our mouth. I was in Apapa Oshodi the other day.
Okay.
I went to see some customer there, and he told me that it takes them 7 days on Apapa Oshodi to move a container for export from that place to the port. 7 days.
Think of all the cost.
Look, of course. When we are giving loans to trailer companies, we'll say he will move from here to the Apapa port, load, go to Benin, 2 days turn back. In a month, he will do 15 or 20 rounds. Now, in a month, they don't even do one trip. And yet, everybody just calm as, if nothing is happening. So, as the chief has said, there is a lot of movement, but no action, nothing's happening.
Talking about nothing happening, let's take a look at the maritime sector here. Would you describe this crucial sector as moribund? What's happened here?
Again, a lot of motions. Let me just talk about one or two things.
All right.
One of the signposts they've had is the Maritime Academy in Oron that produces skilled manpower for the industry. Have been moribund for a long time.
Okay.
I give it to them. They were able to resuscitate it. But you see, the Nigerian waters are known for the most dangerous in the whole world. So ships coming over to Nigeria, either the insurance is double, or they transload to Ghana, and so many things. But I'm happy they said in the first quarter of this year, piracy has reduced. Now, yet you see so much amount of money budgeted, for security. Yet that. So the maritime sector needs to be resuscitated. Look at every shipment now is coming to where? Coming to the Lagos. Yeah. Meanwhile, we have Port Harcourt, we have Warri, we have Calabar. But what's the issue? The draft is very shallow. The piracy in those areas is so high. So again, it's like these are things that can be done when you have people who are really focused on delivering this country. But again, it's like we talk and talk and talk, and very simple things we find them difficult to do. The maritime sector needs to be totally, changed.
Very good. Now, Bola, I know it's still part of kind of related, from maritime to aviation now. So, what are your thoughts there? Are we witnessing any dynamism, or is still business as usual in terms of competitiveness among the airlines? Are we seeing new things happening, or is just business as usual?
We're almost going to be at risk of sounding like a broken record on this program, because as we move from sector to sector, we're seeing commonality. And we should not be surprised, because in the absence of policy framework, and where the framework exists, in the absence of implementation, this is what you will get.
Indeed.
The maritime sector, the revenue potential there is in excess of 10, 20, $30 billion a year. In the aviation sector, particularly now that our roads have become death traps in terms of poor quality roads, in terms of the security risk, you will think that you will see a significant uplift in the aviation sector, because demand will increase. But what you have is, they also have a regulator who clearly needs to work a lot harder to ensure standardization, quality, and consistency of service delivery, right? To ensure that there is a framework where entrepreneurs who want to play in this space can access long-term, decently priced financing that they can use to acquire the planes, maintain the planes. Most of the airlines in Nigeria, Amcon owns Aero Contractors and Arik.
Yeah.
Apart from one airpiece, every other one is struggling. Maybe 2 or 3 planes that they struggle with. You know, so there is a lot of investment that needs to go into that sector. Our airport infrastructure needs to be overhauled. You know, there are some airports, there are some states that have no businesses owning airports, and we're still making fresh investments into airports that see 2 or 3 airplanes land in an entire week. So there is a whole ecosystem in the aviation industry that we need to have a sit down and a rethink. The government is trying to float yet another national carrier. That is definitely the last thing we need to complicate an already bad situation.
All right, gentlemen.
Do you have a second? Can
okay, just a second.
Add something on that.
Yeah.
But I comment, you know, that's something that was good for Nigeria.
All right.
Was when, again, poor planning, Abuja wrong way, that we have been screaming things that should be resurfaced. We had to close the airport down and then to build another
to fix it, I think. You need more than 2 runways.
New runway.
Yeah.
And so they gave a deadline on when the airport will be open. And for the first time in Nigeria, they kept the deadline. Again, because of the international people, it was going to be a total disgrace for us. So, but I will give that to them.
All right.
But just supporting my bio. There's no aviation industry without airlines.
Okay.
Do you know it's a shame? There's no Nigerian airline that does international flights, apart from Ghana. None. It's a shame. Now, aviation, airlines don't survive without government support. There's nowhere in the world. Go and check. There's one subsidy or one helping hand or somewhere or the other. And we must recognize the importance of aviation, as Bayer said, in the whole economy and support them.
Very good.
Okay,
just 30 seconds, Chief.
Just 30 seconds. Thank
All right.
you. When I was younger,
Okay.
and in banking,
Yeah.
in the maritime sector, you used to open LCs, and the point of destination is Warri, Port Harcourt. Everybody comes to Apapa and come to Wharf, so it's going to be a disaster. And well, let me quickly go to the airlines. For me, Air Nigeria is a desideratum. It has to come on. There is no airline in the world that and government has a hand in it that does not experience periodic capital increases, like the Nigerian Airways. Nigerian Airways, the government of Obasanjo did not have to liquidate Nigerian Airways. It needed a capital increase. South Africa Airways, capital increases, Ghana, Cameroon, Kenya, all of them. Until the British Airways became private. It was the British government, and so on and so forth. So if we do not have a national airline that can go everywhere in the world, we will continue to be at the receiving end of airlines. There are about 5 or 7 classes of a ticket. The last 3 are the cheap rates. They are not in Nigeria. They are not sold here. So we are always made to buy the most expensive tickets to be able to go anywhere outside Nigeria.
All right, you're welcome back to the Global Business Report. I'm Ni Uilo. Due to popular demand, we still have our guests on the studio, still talking about issues pertaining to the economy and, of course, Nigeria under President Buhari. All All right, gentlemen. Earlier, before we went off, we talked about trends in the aviation sector. Now, we're seeing instances whereby there have been complaints in terms of our airports, infrastructural development, as it were, and even in terms of total radar coverage, of our region. But we're seeing that efforts towards that. But could there be more? What do you make of it, Chika?
I need to commend them, the authorities also, especially on the facilities side. I do recall some time I was stranded in Benin Airport for almost 3 days in a row. They thought they had to take a night bus to come back to Lagos because of the fact that, one, when it's raining, the clouds are low, you can't land aircrafts in Benin. In a particular instance, one of the aircrafts there was hovering for almost 30 minutes. But that has been solved now. Yeah. The Benin Airport now, I'm sure, Chief, that they can do night landings now and low weather landings. So that's good. Also, I do, when we fly into Ghana, we used to be very ashamed of a Nigerian airport. I do remember one day we landed at Côte d'Ivoire Airport. Yeah. And we were just, we were hiding our faces. In that Côte d'Ivoire Airport, if your bread or snack falls on the floor, you can actually pick it up and eat it. But now, I've not entered the new Abuja Airport, but those who have entered it testify to the fact that, it's good. Yeah. Well, it's one of the advantages of having government in continuity. You do recall that it's right from the former administration, and then this administration they completed the project. The same thing with Port Harcourt. So we have had on equipment for landing, instrument lighting systems, airport lighting. There have been a lot of improvements in those areas. I will give it to them. They have an improvement area. But what we said before was that even if you have the best airports, the best runways, if there are no aircraft, no airlines, there's no aviation. Indeed. And Chief brought up an issue, which Bio is one side, and then Chief is another side. Yeah. Now, it requires capacity to run airlines. It requires funding. Now, if you do recall, 2 or 3 days ago, the Honorable Minister for Transportation, the bigger minister, Amechi, talked about the fact that they will have issues in the Executive Council as to 2 views as to how the Air Nigeria should be activated. Yeah. One group said government should fund it totally and then unsell it. Another group said find some private investors and partner with them to run the airline. See, let's put it this way: a country of 180 million people. Yeah. Traveling public is only about 6%. Do we need more aircraft in Nigeria? Yes. Do the airlines in Nigeria have the capacity to do it? No. The number of aircraft flying aircraft have now is no more than 40. Okay. And one airline has about 22 to 3 of them. And so the other ones, as my colleague said, were having 2, 3 days. Indeed, last week, one of the airlines had only 1 aircraft remaining. So it's a problem. Yeah. So do we need more aircraft? Yes. Where would aircraft come from? Do the private airlines have the funding regime to do that? Yeah. No. That is where the government, comes in. I really have no issue with the Air Nigeria, but the issue I have is, will it be a business as usual? I do recall one time I was going to New York in those old days. It was Nigerian Airways, and we were boarding, and we were rushing to the aircraft, fighting each other. Yeah. When we entered the aircraft was half empty. Wow. Because people had paid we had to bribe to get our boarding passes. And so those who couldn't bribe went home. When we boarded the aircraft to New York, the aircraft was half empty. So are we going to go for that era when, anything goes? People have asked me in this program, government don't run an airline. What of the Ethiopian airline?
Yeah, it's been on for a long time.
Yeah, but that doesn't work that way. People will always say, what of? See, Ghana Airways collapsed. Same problem. Even Cameroon Airlines collapsed. They're just trying to come up again. Most of the countries in Nigeria had their airlines collapsed. Ethiopian Airline, people tend to forget that. What happened was that Emperor Haile Selassie, in 1945, when he took over, when the empire of Ethiopia came into play, well, the first thing he did was that he wrote to the U.S. government, wrote to the American government, British government and French government, said, I want to run a first-class airline. 1945. And so what happened was TWA of America came in to set up a Ethiopian airline. Yeah. The cleaners, everything, the technicians, everybody was American citizens, American staff. They developed systems and structures that are everlasting. It was after a time they started bringing Ethiopians into the system. Yeah. And that's how that continuity has gone. So, yes, Air Nigeria, but how are we going to do it? Is it just going to be business as usual? That's the problem. So that it just collapse like it has been. Or it will collapse like Nigerian National Shipping Line and other Nigerian owned ventures. So the issue is how will the airline be run and managed? That's the issue. That's the issue.
Yeah, very good. Very good, Chika. Now, just before we go to London, you mentioned the issue of commercial viability of some of these aircraft. And the question goes to you, Chief. Is it more of political consideration than economic motives that you'd want to set up an airport where, definitely the flying public is just minimal, it's nil? So why would you want to go that route? Is it just a question of...
The flying public is not nil. I tell you, there is, most times of the year, there is no aircraft you will board in London or in Atlanta or in Houston, or in South Africa.
There's always a ready market for that.
And the planes are always full.
Yeah.
In Nigeria, there's a crying need for many areas to be opened up. And I tell you, even if you are going to Yola, and Adamawa state citizens know that this flight leaves by 4 p.m. on every Wednesday, the plane will be filled up. Nobody wants to be on the road anymore right now because there's a lot of danger on the roads. If I can get a plane that takes me to my village, my God, I will enter. And then, there's no place to land right now. So for me, it is both political and economic. And let me tell you, tourism is also promoted by the fact that you have a national airline. So the ease of just flying in and flying out is there. British Airways, I don't even know if they have up to 2,000 flights a day. But they go everywhere. Times have changed. The type of management the Nigerian Airways had prior to the year 2000 or 2001, when it was totally liquidated, is going to be different now. Look at Airpeace. Airpeace has managed, you see, to operate effectively. Maybe not too efficiently, but has operated effectively. And right now, it plans to, it's acquiring more aircraft to go to Houston.
He has the aircraft already.
The aircraft are on ground. I think they need permission. But do you know there's something else? Many foreign airlines are part of the campaign
against them
to kill the idea of a local Nigerian government-owned airline, because they know once this airline comes on stream, then they will be forced to be a lot more competitive than they are now. And then the Nigerian populace, the Nigerian flying public, at least on the international route, will be able to have a lot better pricing than they currently have. To me, it is essential that we have a national airline, and the job content of an airline is massive.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I'd like to thank you all again for being here. Chief Lawson Amokhedien, Bayo Rotimi, and of course, Chika Mbonu. Pleasure to have you all. It's good to have you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's all on this special edition of Global Business Report. Stay tuned to Arise News from all of us. Thanks for being there. I'm Ni Wei Lo.